Hello, I'm Eleanor Campo, Professor of History at the University of Southern California. I'm deeply honored to chair this commemorative session in honor of our beloved colleague, Rachel Fuchs, who suddenly left us last October during her tenure as a visiting professor at the Citadel. It was very typical of Rachel that after a long career at the University of Arizona State University, she, upon retiring, decided to take on new responsibilities at the Citadel, not only as a professor teaching, but also organizing a series of talks last fall. It was in this context that she left us, and many of the people here today were part of that speaker series that was about half completed. This panel is one of several commemorative events. An issue of French Historical Studies will be published in her honor. An H. France Salon reviewing her publications will soon be posted, and a commemorative session devoted to her will take place in August at the Pacific Coast branch of the AHA. These and other celebrations of her life and work are testimony to the extent and depth to which she touched so many people across fields and generations. Members of today's panel represent part of that mix, for we range from those who knew Rachel from the outset of her and our careers to those of younger generations whom she mentored. Formally or informally, she mentored all of us and inspired us by her example. She listened, she comforted, she made us laugh, and she took us with her down the fascinating rabbit holes of her archival digging. As chair of this session, I cannot take time to detail what Rachel meant to me as a mentor, colleague, collaborator, and most importantly, close friend. But I would like to say just two things. First, that I met her on the occasion of the first academic paper I ever gave in 1981. She did for me then what she did for me for so many of us, what she did for so many of us present, not just on the panel, but in the audience of this session. She valued our work, and she did so demonstratively. She gave me unstinting support and encouragement in my work and through our friendship for 35 years. Second, since 1985, I cannot remember a single meeting of this society, and I went to all but about 5 of them, where Rachel was not present, and when we did not manage to have a great meal and stimulating conversation. Her absence at this particular annual meeting is very difficult for me, as I know it is for all of us. We keep expecting to see her turn the corner in every part of this hotel. I feel privileged to be part of the celebration of what she meant to us collectively, of what she brought to the profession of French history, and especially what she brought to this society, to which she devoted many extraordinary years of service. Before introducing the panelists, I would like to thank Cheryl Coos, Professor of History and newly appointed Associate Dean at California State University, Los Angeles. While she is not on the panel, we are all grateful to her for having organized it. Our first speaker is Linda Clark, Professor Emerita of Millersville University of Pennsylvania, and the author of 4 monographs ranging from social Darwinism in France to the education of girls and the rise of women professionals in French administration. Her most recent book, Women and Achievement in 19th Century Europe, was published by Cambridge University Press in 2008. She also has numerous articles and essays, one of which appeared in the volume that Rachel co-edited, Gender and the Politics of Social Reform in France. Our second participant is Vinnie Data. She is Professor of French Studies at Wellesley, author of 2 monographs, Heroes and Legends of Fin de Siècle France, Gender Politics and National Identity, and Birth of a National Icon, The Literary Avant-Garde and the Origins of Intellectual France. Her current work is on French-American encounters at the end of the 19th century. She has an article on Buffalo Bill in France forthcoming in French Historical Studies. Vinnie will be followed by Victoria Thompson, who is Associate Professor at Arizona State University and thus a longtime colleague of Rachel Fuchs. Among her many publications are 2 books. Her monograph, The Virtuous Marketplace, Women and Men, Money and Politics in Paris, 1830 to 1870, and a work she co-authored with Rachel, Women in 19th Century Europe. Victoria has 2 book projects underway. One is Inventing Public Space, the Parisian Royal Plaza in the era of the French Revolution. And the second is Touring the Revolution, Lady Morgan and National Identity in France and Great Britain. Richard Hopkins is Assistant Professor of European History at Widener University. Under Rachel's direction, he earned his PhD with distinction at Arizona State University. His recently published monograph, based on the dissertation, is entitled Planning the Green Spaces of 19th Century Paris. His work has appeared as articles and essays in a number of venues, including the Journal of Urban History. Joelle Newlander is Professor of History at the Citadel. She is the author of Programming National Identity, The Culture of Radio in 1930s France. She is currently working on 2 more monographs whose respective titles are Selling Moxie, or How French Women Learned to Survive the Great Depression, and The Feminine Arts, Artist Immigrés and Their Communities in Paris, 1900 to 1940. She has published several articles and essays that have appeared in the Journal of Western History, the Journal of the Western Society of French History, Historical Journal of Film, Radio, and Television, French Politics, Culture, and Society, among others. Our final panelist is Katie Jarvis, who received her PhD from the University of Wisconsin and is currently Assistant Professor of History at the University of Notre Dame. Her book manuscript is titled Politics in the Marketplace, Work, Gender, and Citizenship in Revolutionary France. She has contributed essays to several collections and has an article forthcoming in the Journal of Social History, Exacting Change, Money, Market Women, and the Crumbling Corporate World in the French Revolution. And I should add that we were supposed to have another panelist, Mary Lynn Stewart, who had a family emergency at the last minute and was unable to attend. So let us then begin with Linda Clark.
About Rachel Fuchs. Many of us knew Rachel Fuchs as a colleague whose work we admired and who was also a special friend. I first met Rachel nearly 40 years ago in 1978 at the 4th Berkshire Conference on Women's History. The Berkshire Conference then was a smaller meeting than it currently is, and the number of women in French history who were doing women's history was also considerably smaller. Rachel gave a presentation drawn from her dissertation in progress on abandoned children and the French state's handling of them. We met again in 1981 at the annual French Historical Studies Conference in Bloomington, Indiana, when Rachel was completing the dissertation that became her first book. After our second meeting, there would be fewer years when we did not see each other than years when we did. Our first professional conversations reflected our common interests in the French state's treatment of children. I was then working on curricular materials used in French primary schools and acutely aware of how educational officials of the Third Republic routinely referred to primary schools as the schools for le peuple, in contrast to secondary schools with a more middle-class student body. In the later 1980s, our work-related conversations shifted to themes concerning the French state and gender. Rachel was at work on the project that became her book, Poor and Pregnant in Paris, and I had shifted to women's struggle to obtain higher-level posts in French public administration. But it would be misleading to present our conversations as simply two-person interchanges. They often expanded, as with the collaborative effort that Rachel helped spearhead, and that became the essays 6 of us published in 1995 in the volume Gender and the Politics of Social Reform in France, 1870-1914. Later, when we both signed contracts with the Cambridge University Press to contribute volumes to the New Perspectives on European History series, we routinely kept in touch to make sure that our respective contributions were distinct. Rachel was working on gender and poverty in 19th century Europe, while I dealt with women and professional achievement in 19th century Europe. Our last close professional association was tied in with organizational work for the Society for French Historical Studies. Although Rachel was nearing retirement and thinking about what for her would be some winding down, she agreed to become co-editor of French Historical Studies, unwilling to say no when prevailed upon by a younger colleague. In that capacity, she was also an important contributor at meetings of the SFHS Executive Committee from 2011 to 2014, when I was the executive director. Finally, in 2015, there was Rachel's retirement. In September 2015, we met in Paris, and with our husbands went to 2 opera performances. Opera going was one of Rachel and Norman Fuchs's favorite activities. Rachel and I also used that time in Paris to remember with sadness one of our favorite people in French history, the late Leonard Berlinstein, who died in 2013. Spending time in the 4th arrondissement, near the old location of the Archives de Paris, brought back many memories of Lenny, who often worked there when we were working there. In November 2015, Rachel and I met again at the Chicago meeting of the Western Society for French History, and we combined the meeting with leaving it to go to the Chicago Art Institute and later have dinner. We counted, of course, on there being many more occasions, including meeting in Washington in 2017. Rachel's sudden death last October came as a great shock, and I still find it hard to believe that Rachel is not somewhere in the hotel engaged in conversation with colleagues.
I think I speak for all of us when I say I'm deeply honored to be here to talk about our friend Rachel. And I'll start with a story that she loved to tell about the 2 of us. And I don't tell it as well as she did. But here goes. I first met Rachel at the Western Society for French History meeting in Missoula, Montana in 1993. I was a young assistant professor, and Rachel was a star. Well known to anyone who was working on the Third Republic and on issues of gender. We both arrived at a banquet dinner, and I'm trying to be practical here, but what the heck, we used to always call it our rubber chicken banquet. So we both arrived somewhat late. Very few seats were left, except at a table near, shall we say, an older male colleague who definitely didn't look like he would welcome us. So Rachel turned to me and said, "Would you like to run away with me?" And I turned around, Robert De Niro like, "Are you talking to me?" And immediately said yes. And I've never looked back. What ensued was a magical evening. We went to dinner at a seafood restaurant near a quaint little railroad station overlooking the mountains of Big Sky country. And while I was well aware of the stunning landscape in front of us, what I remember most about that dinner was a great conversation. Rachel was an animated speaker, but also an amazing listener, and had a talent for drawing people out. She asked me questions about my research, gave me some great suggestions, and immediately offered to read my work. And over the next 23 years, help me she did. A tenure and promotion time, reading multiple drafts of books and article manuscripts, including, most recently, my Buffalo Bill piece for French Historical Studies, which is dedicated to her memory. As we know, Rachel was a gifted researcher, but also a generous mentor. She was selfless and devoted to all of her mentees, of whom there are many here today. And if I can, in some small way, pay forward her generosity, I will consider myself both very lucky and very successful. I attended a party a few years ago at Rachel Norman's house when the FHS conference was in Tempe, where Victoria did such a lovely job organizing it, and noticed that the guests were of all ages, from the youngest graduate student to the most seasoned colleagues, and everyone in between. And I remember thinking to myself, I want to be just like that when I grow up. fully engaged in the profession and with colleagues at every stage of career. But lest you think that Rachel and I, when we met, only talked about work, I should hasten to add that our numerous conversations over the years, usually over a glass of wine, we talked about other things, especially our mutual love of France. Rachel was, of course, a ras des archives, but she loved Paris, walking around the city she knew so well. And most of all, she relished going out to bistros, finding hidden gems, and we often compared notes. And Robert Nye has also mentioned this, that Rachel and I were like most French historians in that we would rhapsodize over the next great meal while consuming the current one. You know what I'm talking about, right? It was always hard to get FaceTime with Rachel at conferences because she was so popular, but I cherish those moments. We had a lovely lunch together in Colorado in April 2015, and when she was in Boston the following month, I took her out to lunch to celebrate her retirement, and was so happy to have that time, although I didn't realize it would be the last time I saw her. This past summer, we had been corresponding several times a week about the World War II course that she was teaching at the Citadel and that I was teaching at Wellesley, about her grandchildren's college choices, my son's college choices, and one of the best memories I have of last summer is of that wonderful anticipation of receiving a nearly daily email from Rachel. Rachel had kindly invited me to give a talk at the Citadel, where she was a visiting professor last October, and I was honored. And I also figured she got a kick out of having me talk to cadets about imperialism and the crisis of masculinity. Just think about it, right? She would really like that. We had such great foodie plans for my trip to Charleston, but it wasn't meant to be. Although I know how fortunate Joelle and I are that of her many friends, we got to kiss Rachel goodbye. Rachel and I had so many conversations that we never got to finish. But in my mind, I'm still having an ongoing conversation over a glass of wine, naturally, with this amazing dynamo, this beautiful friend, whose memory I'll always cherish, and whose absence leaves a hole in my heart.
So I'm here to talk about being Rachel's colleague, and I was fortunate enough to come to Arizona State in the fall of 1999, and I had known Rachel for quite a long time at that point. I actually met her when I went to Paris to do my dissertation research, and one of the members of my dissertation committee said, you really need to talk to Rachel Fuchs. So we met at the Auction de Paris, the new, much less fun ones, and she, took me out to lunch and asked me what I was doing and told me what I should look at, and really was very hands-on that whole year. And then subsequently, as I worked on my dissertation and turned it into a book, and when the job came up at ASU and she said, you should apply, and I thought, well, they'll never let us have two 19th century Parisian women's historians, but they did. So we had a great time, and thinking about Rachel as a colleague I've been thinking a lot about the way in which our understanding of history shapes who we are as professionals. And I came to ASU from a small Jesuit university in Cincinnati, and it was a little bit like I imagine the experience would have been of one of these young provincial girls making their way to Paris that Rachel studied. I immediately went, oh my God, I'm swimming with the sharks. And as you know, Rachel, you've heard all the ASU stories, I'm sure. So I don't need to go into detail. But the thing about Rachel was that she immediately took me under her wing, but then was also able to let me grow into a peer. And that was a really important and sometimes difficult relationship that we had because we were negotiating, being mentor-mentee, being colleagues, taking on different roles in a context which was incredibly stressful and often, very unpleasant. But Rachel could always make you laugh. So like we would be talking about one of the latest ASU crises, and she'd be immediately talking about, well, who was a member of the collaboration and who was a member of the resistance, and she'd show up if it was a particularly difficult faculty meeting we had that day. I'd walk in and she'd be wearing her red jacket and, like this. And I know, okay, Rachel is ready to do the battle today. And I'm sure you can imagine being in faculty meetings where you have these obnoxious colleagues who are going off about one thing or another. And as you know, Rachel's so expressive. And so sitting across the room from her, I get her eyebrows. I have to try and keep a straight face. And then also we would always be able to debrief. So it was really, thinking about, preparing for today, it made me realize how incredibly helpful it was because, Rachel had obviously been there longer than I had and had more of a history and more experience with these people and was senior to me and had more confidence. And she really explained the system to me. She really helped me understand how to negotiate very difficult institutional waters and kind of make me understand who were the players on the ground and when people said things that were particularly hurtful to be able to say, that guy's just a jerk, or more colorful language, and make you see that you could survive, and not only you could survive, but you could thrive. I think of, I was lucky enough when we moved into the building that we're in now, maybe 10 years ago now, we assigned offices by seniority, and so I remember Rachel when she had gone in to pick her office, and then she came in and she said, I talked to Norma, who's our secretary, and of course Rachel has great relationships with all the women, including the staff, right? And I talked to Norma, and she's already penciled you in for the office next to me. So even though I was much farther down the ladder, I got to have a very nice office right next to Rachel, and I was very thankful. I still have it today, and that was also really wonderful, not only because, every day I would go and Rachel would be there and we would talk and we would, laugh or cry or commiserate or get angry about whatever it was that was going on, but also because I really learned by watching what it meant to be a good mentor, which was a different experience from having been the mentee, because I could watch with more distance. So when, her graduate students would come to her office, she was always so incredibly welcoming. She would spend long periods of time. She would, my door was open, she would come over and then we would all chat, and then we would start chatting about some department politics, and then there would be this and there would be that. And I really wanted to mention that we would start chatting about department politics, because what was really, something that I learned that I think was really important was that she was very open about how things worked. She didn't, it wasn't like, oh, wait, we can't say that in front of Richard. I think we said everything in front of you, right? But it was good because you learned how things worked, and you learned how to be open. And I found that I have become that person with my junior colleagues and with my students to demystify and to say, yeah, that guy really was a jerk. He was really being sexist, and you did a great job, and don't worry about that. And this is just how this works, and this is what you need to do to get through, like the System Day. Rachel was so good at navigating, and it's been, I think, Rachel, without a doubt, was one of the absolutely most important people in my life. She changed my life. She changed me. I'm so pleased to find myself sometimes saying things that sound just like her. Since her passing, I've had a lot of changes in my life, and I often feel that Rachel is kind of looking down on me and that she would be proud of me. And I hope that's true. I certainly was very, very proud and honored to be her colleague and her friend, and I definitely miss her all the time.
Good afternoon. Excuse me. I had the tremendous privilege to be one of Rachel's doctoral students. So I'll talk a little bit about what that was like and how transformative it was. I met Rachel in 2000, and I was interested in returning to university to pursue a graduate degree. And I went into the history department at ASU because I was constrained in terms of where I could move based on family issues. The chair of the department at the time said, "Oh, you must speak with Rachel Fuchs." I said, "Okay, I'll go speak with Rachel Fuchs." Walked down the hallway to her office. Immediately, she got up from behind her desk and said, "Oh, come in, come in, come in. Sit down, let's talk." And I think over an hour passed of chatting with Rachel. And I mention that always when I start my story of my relationship with Rachel, because I could not have known at that time what that first meeting would lead to and how it would change my life and change me in such significant ways. I eventually became Rachel's doctoral student. She directed my dissertation. Early on, I met with her in conference in her office frequently, nearly every day. And early on, I was so panicked that she would say something wonderful and I would forget it, that I had a pad of paper and I was writing down everything she said. And that was distracting to her. And so I asked her if I could bring a digital recorder, and I would come in with a digital recorder on the desk, and she would, pearls of wisdom would come in. I didn't want to miss anything. Ultimately, however, we sort of moved past that and stopped making her feel uncomfortable. Rachel was just such a generous mentor. My first trips, she called them fishing trips to the archives, short summer trips to the archives to see what was there. She would have me over to dinner in Norman, and she would prepare something wonderful, and Norman would be there, sometimes her family as well if they were visiting. And she would say, "Well, tell me everything. Tell me everything. What did you find in the archives today? What did you do? When did you get there? Were you first in line?" You had to be first in line. And I would tell her everything I had done, and she said, "Ah, you're an archive rat." And this, I said, "I'm a what?" She said, "You're an archive rat. Don't worry, it's a good thing." And she was a self-described archive rat. And I was honored to be in that group, included by her in that group. Rachel was incredibly devoted to her students. She was generous with her time. She read countless drafts of proposals, grants, articles, chapters, along with others in the profession. I don't know where she possibly found the time. She offered her students unwavering support and encouragement. She used to say, if we would get a little insecure or unsure about what we were doing, she'd say, "Ah, don't worry, I have great self-confidence in you." And I think that came from Bill Cohen, perhaps, right? I have great self-confidence in you. Okay? That's good. I have so many fond memories of Rachel. Graduate seminars that would devolve into hilarity, and faculty would knock on the door to see what was going on in the seminar room. Working with her and Kent Wright and Amy Long on the journal, the French Historical Studies, was an amazing experience. Late afternoons at Trix Cafe in Tempe, where the bartender knew precisely how to make her martini. She loved that. And they welcomed her like "Hello, Dolly" when she would come in. Right? But something that strikes me about my time with Rachel, our endless walks and conversation. And I know many of you have had that experience with Rachel too. She had a way, excuse me, of making you feel like you were the center of the universe for that period of time. Asking questions, remembering things about your life, your interests. We talked about everything. We talked about, of course we talked about research and history, but we talked about politics. We talked about striking balance in your life, happiness, family, friends. I actually knew many of you before I even met you. From stories that Rachel would recount of running away and these sorts of things. And so those for me were such magical times. And when I think of Rachel, that's really what I think of. I can say with confidence that there is, as a result of being her student, there is so much of Rachel in me. It's just part of my being now. I can hear her voice, I hear myself repeating things that she said, the way I think about the profession, the way I think about myself in the profession, it's so deeply rooted in Rachel. I'm so grateful that I had that relationship with this truly remarkable woman. And I think today and at this conference, I'm feeling a lot of Rachel here in all of us. And that brings me great joy. And I hope it does you as well.
That got me crying, which is really unfair. Okay. I think, she was with me for her last couple of months, which was an extraordinary honor for me to have her in my life. In a sense, I think in some ways, I was one of those last kindred spirits that she met in that Anne of Green Gables way. We have this position at the Citadel, and I think you probably know from stories from me that it's a bit of a unique institution. And when I applied there originally as this young New York Jewish feminist, I had no idea that there was this visiting position there. It's for scholars to come in and teach and share their knowledge with our cadets. And scholars come in for either a semester or a year to teach a class or two and really become part of the department and part of the Citadel family. And year after year, I would sort of watch other colleagues invite their friends, or we would have searches for people to come in, and I kept thinking to myself how much I wanted to bring somebody in, particularly as a line of diplomatic and military historians kind of came through the door, and I thought, their classes aren't really surprising the students in any real way, given the temperament of the college. And I kept sort of thinking, who do I want? Who, if I could convince them to come, would come, and then who could do it and do it well? And I think partly, I thought of Rachel, partly because I had sort of admired her. She was always very kind to me, but I'd always admired her from afar in a way, sort of watching her as she sort of just sparkled through conferences and sparkled her way through all of French history. It was kind of amazing to me to watch. And I thought, that's the one. Right? She's the one who can do it, who can come in and be both Jewish grandma and taskmistress to these students. And really be able to kind of confront this military atmosphere and do it with great panache. And so I asked her to come. And she said yes, which kind of amazed me. And then we started talking and exchanging emails, and it began what became a very beautiful friendship together. And she kept, before she came, she kept sending me emails and asking me, who do you want me to bring in? And I kept saying, whoever you want, Rachel, it's yours. You get to decide. And whoever you want would be lovely, really. And she gave names and I went, yes, yes. Absolutely, I can't wait. And she asked me, what should I teach? And we settled on a course on France in World War II, given that we need to have war in the title of every one of our courses. It's amazing. It's what it is. There wasn't a war in this period, but I'm going to call this course War. I have to have 10 to make it apply. But so she came and she asked me about what she should be teaching and how she should organize her class. And we spent a summer really exchanging tons of emails back and forth. And I had the joy of meeting her at the airport on the day that she and Norman arrived and taking her to her house on campus and settling her in. She did what she magically does, which is integrated herself beautifully into the community. She made friends right away, particularly there's a cheesemonger downtown. And she asked me what my favorite cheese was, and I told her that it's a cheese called Saint-Félicien, and they didn't have that one, so she brought me a huge époisse to put in my fridge on campus so that we could share it over lunch for that week. But she also amazed the students, and it was fun for me to have the students come to me to tell me what a joy she was, that she was tough, that they weren't getting away with anything, which is good, they try to get away with everything, and that she really brought them a perspective that they hadn't had before. I don't think they had ever heard anyone who had any negative things to say about Charles de Gaulle. She had some things to say about it. And of course, when confronting the resistance in World War II, she had them, of course, read Lucille Black, right? So she brought women's history to them, she brought a new perspective to them, and she really brought a new perspective to me. Rachel, for me, is the kind of academic I aspire to be. I think for all of us, we feel this way. True friend, a true mentor, and kind to everyone she meets, really. Just a smile and someone who embraces and brings people in, and she certainly did that with me, and those last couple of months were wonderful. And I will say one of the things is that she had let me know very clearly how much she adored all of you. That we talked a lot about her friendships and her love of her colleagues and her friends in the community. And I hope you know that in her final moments, I really let her know how much you all loved her as well. So thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here to speak in honor of dear Rachel today. I would just like to say thanks to Cheryl for organizing, and once again, Rachel's doing her community building magic, because I'm meeting more people that no doubt she would have introduced me to in person eventually, but here we meet her in spirit. So I first met Rachel at a cafe near Untitled in Paris in 2010. I was just starting my dissertation research year while Rachel was on her trip scouring the archives. My advisor had asked me, do I want the chance to meet the author of Corner Pregnant? And if so, she had her contact number. And Rachel, who had absolutely no connection to me, had only two precious weeks left in her archives, who focused on the century after the revolution I studied, and who had recently dislocated her right shoulder, of course said, yes. So I was thrilled for the chance to talk with Rachel. I, like so many of us, found her work to uncover the history of marginalized women absolutely intellectually tenacious. Her method for working with state documents like hospital records, paternity suits, and public assistant records to reach beyond the formulas of magistrates offered me a model of how to tap into the world of the market woman that I studied. I admired Rachel's scrappy ability to connect gritty social history to the macro narratives of gender and politics. At our first cafe, Rachel asked me how the research was going, and her sincerity put me strangely enough at ease to fully admit it was not going well. After 4 weeks of combing through carton after carton, my market woman had only popped out of the documents a few dozen times. Rachel asked me if I had tried the lesser well-known archives at the Hotel de Ville, or the police records in the departmental archives at the edge of the city. She helped me brainstorm which archivists to contact, what judicial places the market woman might appear through their own initiative, of course, and what new administrative interest the revolutionary state could have in them. She also shared her own dissertation struggles, her current research challenges, and tips for asserting oneself as a woman in the archives. Before we finished our hour-long conversation, Rachel leaned in, and she looked me in the eye, and she said with confidence that predated my own by about 8 months, "You'll find their voices." I was profoundly grateful. And as we finished our first conversation, I realized I needed to quickly get to the Sorbonne for a seminar. And Rachel, solver of all problems, pointed out it would be faster to take the bus than the metro. And then Rachel, slaying with her dislocated shoulder and all, proceeds to walk me across the street and then wait for me at the bus stop and put me on the bus as if sending a child off to their first day of school. I was a little concerned. I didn't know whether to feel flattered or, oh my gosh, Rachel Fuchs just put me on the bus. But I promised I would keep her up to date about my project. So I imagine, like most of us in this room, have been the lucky recipients of Rachel's generosity, and I'm still struggling to mathematically comprehend how she managed to support so many of us, even those who are not officially her students. I can only speak from my own experience, but Rachel's version of staying in touch included 103 emails over the course of 6 years. And that was just the beginning. Rachel went to bat time and again for junior scholars especially. In Denmark in 2013, she agreed to chair and comment on a graduate student panel that Namisha Barton, Annie Salbert, and I were on, even though Rachel was giving the keynote address at that panel, or at that conference, and then to our surprise, she managed to reference our work in her keynote address. A few weeks later, Rachel was in France, where she agreed to speak to a research seminar on gender in the popular classes that some French colleagues and I ran. Excuse me. Without official gender history courses at the Sorbonne, Rachel's visit completely energized the thirsty French and American doctoral students there. She graciously shared her brilliant work in progress and discussed our ideas with every ounce of respect she showed her senior colleagues. In order to accommodate everyone, Rachel took the time to prepare her visit in French while she was serving as the president of CCWH and the editor for FHSO and trying to do that research she was in Paris to actually get done. She then agreed to contribute a version of the piece in our special issue of Genre et Histoire, but only if her submission would, quote, not deprive a younger scholar of the opportunity to publish. The following year, Rachel invited me to be on a CCWH panel at the AHA on gender and citizenship. This is my subject, but admittedly, I was partially suspicious that she wanted me to have the opportunity, as part of her community of building enthusiasm, to continue my conversations with Namisha and meet other scholars of European gender like Eliza. In addition to all the event-based ways she supported junior scholars, Rachel fostered our professional development through pep talks on work and life, conference debriefings to speak about publication trajectories, and humbling requests for feedback on her own work. She wrote letters of support for fellowships and jobs, and then when she landed one, she would not only celebrate, but use her experience as department chair to scrutinize every last line of that contract. Rachel remained remarkably in tune with the realities of being a new assistant professor. She convinced me to go to a conference my first semester of teaching for social as much as intellectual reasons. And then, just before the conference, she wrote me an email, quote, saying, "You may use the Western to now catch up on sleep." She had a plan all along. Her CCWH President's column attested to her grasp of the shifting challenges for junior scholars while affirming the power of community building and mentoring. She modeled both so well. Ever the scholarly dynamo, Rachel left us with unfinished projects. Her 2016 article, Angel Makers at the Quartier Notre-Dame des Champs, Community and Personal Networks in 1870s Paris, gives us a taste of what was yet to come. The article embraces microhistory and a court case involved in neighborhood relationships to probe how women negotiated layered networks of power. Using the voluminous paper trail of a criminal court, Rachel traces the 1873 case of two midwives accused of providing illegal abortions along with their suspected client. At the center of the case is a tension between two power hierarchies. The first involved communal hierarchies regulated by personal relationships and local standards of acceptable behavior. In this vein, Rachel argues that the accuser reported one midwife in revenge for gossiping against her rather than for providing abortions. Rachel notes that neighbors' testimony found fault with the accused midwife, quote, because of her alleged sexual immorality and because she charged more for those abortions than community norms. But, as Rachel argues, the state had power once someone broke those neighborhood ties and denounced another. Judicial narratives, criminal codes, and state-endorsed gender norms ultimately eclipse local understandings of the conflict and its players. So almost 7 years ago, Rachel told me I would find the voice of my historical actors, but I think that Rachel helped many of us find our own voice as well. Her life reminds us to use this privilege not only to speak, but to listen, to collaborate, and to engage, and to strengthen our own communities of students, colleagues, and friends.
Thank you so much for those wonderful comments. So we'll open comments up to the audience now, and this is being recorded, so we'll be passing out microphones around. Or a microphone. So would anybody like to?
Thank you all so much. Is that on?
It won't project, but if you talk.
Okay. Oh, I see. Well, now that's all been taught for posterity. So thank you all so much for being here and for sharing your memories. I have two questions. One is a joke, and one is a question. I'll leave it to you to decide which is which. So the joke is, we all live in a time zone where there's only 24 hours in the day, but I'm wondering what time zone Rachel lived in, where she somehow was able to do all of this work all the time, and she was also such a great mentor and colleague and teacher and everything else. So, any thoughts you have on that would be, I would like to move to that time zone. The second question I have is really just sort of about mentorship, as you all experienced it through Rachel, especially because mentorship, particularly for people in the academy who are trying to make their voices heard. And so I was just wondering what kind of model she set for you and what lessons you might have taken from her, and the extent to which you think that is maybe still important just in your own careers, with your fellow colleagues, with your peers, and also with your own students.
Actually, to the first question, which I think was the joke, but is actually really serious. Thank you. Rachel sacrificed a lot to be such a good mentor to everyone. Her book, Contested Paternity, took a long time to write, and it took a long time to write because she was so generous with her time. She was associate chair of the history department. She was the founding director of the Institute for Humanities Research at ASU. She mentored junior faculty. She worked with graduate students. She's reading people's work, and I think it's just a testament to how important that community building was for her, and that being a scholar was not just about publications, but it was about creating something that would last. And so I feel like all the time that she invested into all of us was about thinking about the future of the profession, the future of our field. She certainly cared deeply about ASU and the future of the institution, and I just really, I really admire her for that. And I think it's one thing that as I found myself following her footsteps, even though she warned me all the time about that I should publish more and not do all these other things, I understand it because there's such intense satisfaction in seeing other people succeed. And I just think that was something about Rachel that was so generous and that really, I just really wanted to say that. I think she really sacrificed to be the person that she was for all of us. And I think that's admirable.
I'd like to add something about contested paternity, which I knew her through all her books, but ironically, it was her third book and won 3 awards, so it did make her suffer a lot, and she had many versions of it. And it broke my heart when she received her first copy of it. She threw it down the stairs, and she called me and she hated it. She probably never told anybody that. She hated it because she couldn't stand the font. She thought it was too small and that nobody would be able to read the book. And of course, the font was small because for economic reasons. But I was so thrilled when that book became so successful, and I think it was the height of her excellence. And I also want to add, partly in answer to your question, nobody mentioned that she started her career after having 2 children, and she started late. So she really did. Your explanation is quite right, but I still don't know how she did it.
Yeah, no,
because even though the contested paternity took a long time, it was a very complicated book, and she still did it. So it's amazing. Would anybody else like to make a comment?
I'd also like to thank each of you for these extraordinary memories and observations and all. I just want to add one thing that I think each of us recognized in Rachel that actually hasn't been said yet. She was a person of enormous and wonderful style. And I say this because in my mind, I think there are these 2 iconic women historians of France. Ms. Natalie Davis and Ms. Rachel. And they both had that amazing ability to bring humanity to life, to bring the really human aspect of the historical condition, to be extraordinary scholars and mentors. And wow, they look good. Anybody else?
I'll keep this very short because I think I didn't know Rachel as well as many of you, but I do feel I did know her and got a lot from her. And without going into details, I have to say that when I came into the historical profession in the mid-70s, there was a model of what kind of how one treated one another, what the profession was like, backbiting, competitive, difficult, always looking over your shoulder, always looking to jab in the knife and then turn it. And Rachel represented for me the complete opposite of that model. Another way of being a historian, of being an academic, of being a colleague and a friend, and nurturing and supportive, and in just the most wonderful ways. And I told Tip when we came in today that, I never cry at these things, but you all made me a liar because I really appreciated Rachel and all of you for your comments. Thank you.
I suspect, well, I think I always knew Rachel. I don't remember when I met Rachel. I think we just always sort of knew each other. It's just like I know a lot of people in this room, and we just kind of know each other at conferences, and we know who they are and what they wrote, and sort of know that. And then there's Paris, and Paris creates this possibility of these more ways to get to know people that we kind of know we don't know. Victoria and I did this one summer not too long ago too. So there was one summer that I stumbled in, thanks to Jennifer Jones, I stumbled into the Archives de la Seine. She sent me there to look at something, and I didn't know what I was doing there, and happily, Rachel, of course, was there. And she, of course, took me to lunch, also showed me how to get the things I was looking for. Took me to lunch, and then we discovered that we were both living in the 6e. And so it so came to pass that we ended up spending the night of the Festival de la Musique together that year. I don't know how many hours we walked around the 6e, and we would stop and we would listen to music, and we would move on, and we'd stop somewhere and get a drink. We spent hours, and I learned about her family. I learned about her struggles as a graduate student. I learned about, we just talked like friends, like we'd always been friends, or like we would at some point become friends. And it was some kind of a Brigadoon thing, because although we were friends after that much more, it was that one thing that being a French historian becomes possible. And I'm forever grateful. And the Festival de la Musique has always been a disappointment after that. Because I always thought it was great, but it was actually just that one time with Rachel until about 2 in the morning that I felt like we somehow connected French history and friendship and, I don't know, Jewish women and whatever, everything became possible in the dark with the music to talk about and kind of represents me the best of this community that we belong to. So I'm grateful to have had that time with Rachel.
Anybody? Final comments? Okay, well, I guess we're gonna leave a little bit early, but I hope, for me, this has been very important because it helps have joy in Rachel collectively and as a community. And one of the things I realized when I went to her memorial service in Arizona was that the communities that she created engendered in us an ability to create more communities. And as one of you said about her mentoring, I too learned from her how to mentor, and I never could do it in the way that she did, but it inspired my teaching and it inspired my relationship with students and my relationships with colleagues. And I think she made us all a much, much better person in ourselves. And so today is very special because we've come together to celebrate her as well as mourn her. And I think, and I hope that we will leave this event as better people and aspiring to be more like her. So thank you all for coming, and thank you all for your wonderful comments.